Blog Talk Radio.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Laurie Smith on Blog Talk Radio. Good evening. It is 10:30 p.m. here in Calgary, Alberta, Monday, January 24th. This is Child Abuse Prevention and Human Rights Abuse Prevention. It's up to us. 30-minute live internet streaming radio broadcast from blogtalkradio.com. Chat room is open, and I do have the link in there to what I wanted to talk about tonight. And we left off. I missed my show Friday night. Sorry about that. And as well on Saturday. I was really rather busy this weekend. But Wednesday night we left off talking about causes and effects of child abuse, looking at abusive mothers, and sort of this website goes through and talks about abusive mothers, abusive fathers, abusive siblings, and the effects of child abuse and whatnot. It's some pretty good information. I just kind of stumbled across it not too long ago, and I just wanted to kind of go over some of this stuff and take a look at what they had to say. They have some pretty good research material there from some people who did some actual studies and research on it, and so I think it's worth looking at. And so, yeah, thanks everybody for tuning in. I appreciate you all being here. I'm not a counselor or therapist or anything like that. I don't hold any certificates in this area. I'm just a private citizen paying to do my own blog talk shows, and the reason why is because I'm a survivor of child abuse, and also because I'm the Canada Regional Director for Dream Catchers for Abused Children. And, I continually study and looking at information regarding child abuse prevention, the issues that surround child abuse, so because I'm a survivor. And so I'm always looking into information for myself as well, right? So that's why I'm doing these shows, really to be one more voice out here. I just want to be one more voice talking about the issues surrounding child abuse, and that we need to stop it, and we need to prevent it from ever happening. And no child should ever be abused. It just bothers me. And also just to be one more voice, standing up for child rights and standing up for survivors. So many people cannot come forward. So many people cannot disclose the abuse. So many people are not in that position. And I wanted to be one more voice, just to be a voice on behalf of survivors, to speak out against abuse, and also to be a voice of encouragement for survivors. So that's why I'm doing my shows. So you have to listen at your own discretion. I talk about all the issues surrounding all types. Mainly child abuse and domestic violence and whatnot, but I'm talking about all, human rights abuses and whatnot, and abuse is a sensitive subject, so you have to listen at your own discretion. You have to know what's good for you to listen to, and if the show might bother you, you have to know that you have to turn it off, right? So you have to make that decision, so you listen at your own discretion. Young people under the age of 18, I ask that you have permission to listen to my shows, because I cover a lot of adult content on my shows. And I just believe in protecting children at all times. That's what we're doing with Dream Catchers for Abused Children. We're fighting to save children's lives along with everybody else out here. So please do yourself a favor, do me a favor, and have somebody listen to the show with you who's older and an adult who can help you make the decision whether you should be listening or not, right? So I appreciate it very much. Thank you. I have no idea where the players are anymore, the Blog Talk players, and, who's listening to my shows, right? So, I don't know how young the people are. So if you're really young, make sure that you know how to keep yourself safe in a chat room, first of all. Get that information just by typing into your browser, internet safety, online safety for children, things like this. And it'll bring up websites with good information on there on how to keep yourself safe in a chat room, and how to keep yourself safe online, and what to look out for, what information not to give away. There's so much information you really need to know. If you don't know it, make sure that you get it so you can keep yourself safe. If you do not want to be a victim of a child sexual predator or pedophile, you absolutely do not. You want to keep yourself safe and protected, and hopefully you have someone in your family who cares about what you're doing online and will help you to find that information and help you to stay safe, right? So we're going to get into this show here. I wanted to look at this causes and effects of child abuse and abusive fathers. That's the next section. We left off talking about abusive mothers on Wednesday night, and now the next section is abusive fathers. It's a very short section, so we're probably going to go right from there into abusive siblings and finish this off right today, or hopefully we'll be able to finish it off tonight. But I'm just going to read from the page, and this is from www.libraryindex.com. And it's called Causes and Effects of Child Abuse, Abusive Fathers. If you go to libraryindex.com, www.libraryindex.com, you can go to social issues and debate topics, and then follow the links: Causes and Effects of Child Abuse, some contributing factors to child abuse, the violent family, abusive mothers, abusive fathers, abusive siblings. So we're just sort of working our way through this article, right? Through these articles. And so this is the abusive father section. So I'm just reading from the page here, and you can read through here too and check out the website. There's some good information on here and lots of info on all kinds of different things, right? Library Index. So Katrina L. Scott and Claire V. Crooks noted that despite the fact that some fathers are perpetrators of child maltreatment, very little research has been done on abusive fathers. According to the authors, for intervention services to be effective, it is important to know the characteristics of abusive fathers. That's from Affecting Change in Maltreating Fathers, Critical Principles for Intervention Planning, Clinical Psychology, Science and Practice, Volume 11, Number 1, Spring 2004. So this is where they're talking about this from this Clinical Psychology, Science and Practice, Volume 11, Number 1. So abusive fathers tend to be, they said, very controlling of their children, being self-centered. They demand respect and unconditional love. They are insecure and are constantly looking for signs of defiance or disrespect. They're talking about abusive fathers. They're not talking about regular fathers. They're not talking about decent fathers who are not abusing their children. They're talking about abusive fathers, right? They said abusive fathers tend to be very controlling of their children, being self-centered. They demand respect and unconditional love. They are insecure and are constantly looking for signs of defiance or disrespect. And that's quite interesting, I think. I know growing up in an abusive home, both my parents were my abusers, but my mother was my main abuser. But my dad was very abusive towards my brothers, his sons, because he thought that they were not respecting him. So he was always demanding respect, and he would not earn respect. He would just demand it. So he would call my mother names and hit my mother, and then my mom would try to defend herself, and then my brothers would get involved and try to help my mom out. And then my dad would say that they were disrespecting him, and so that he could beat them up, right? He would just use any excuse so he could have control over them, because that's what abuse is. It's all about control, right? So he would say, well, my sons, you're not respecting me, and you're my son, and you have to do what I say, and you have to be on my side, and you have to, you should be on my side of this, because they were always trying to stand up for my mom, see? So my dad really had it in for my brothers because they were trying to protect my mother, right? It says an abusive father may feel that a child has more power than he does and may misinterpret a child's action as misbehavior. He therefore inflicts physical abuse to regain control. An abusive father has a sense of entitlement, expecting his children to do as he says. Scott and Crooks pointed out that sexual abuse may result from the father's sense of entitlement. And that's just really absolutely crazy that people would think, parents, men, right, or anyone, any parent, mother or father, would think that they have that, the right to abuse their children. It's absolutely horrific. And, even though parents a lot of times they know, most people know that abuse is against the law. And, that if they do abuse their children, it's against the law. And they could be brought up on charges. But so many parents don't care. And that was the case with my parents. They were brought up on abuse charges. Both of my parents were brought up on child abuse charges. And they just did not care. Because they didn't care if the courts knew what they were doing to their children or not. And I remember a couple of beatings I got from my mother where I was, my face was bruised and scratched, and I was going to have to hide my face all day, like my cheek, from at school. And I told my mom, I said, what am I going to tell the teacher about this? Pointing to my face, right? And my mom was like, I don't care. Tell her I hit you, right? And tell her I'll do it again, too, if you don't straighten up. See, my parents were very physically abusive. And so they just feel like they have the right, they have the entitlement to do whatever they want to their children. So that's what they're saying about sexual abuse, too, child sexual abuse, is that quite often they feel that an abusive father has a sense of entitlement, expecting his children to do as he says. And Scott and Crooks pointed out that sexual abuse may result from the father's sense of entitlement. So that's just horrible, absolutely ridiculous that parents think that they can get away with this stuff, because they do, sadly enough. Most parents walk free. I mean, there's only the handful that we see in the papers and the news that are getting brought up on charges. There's very few people that have that are ever, forced to pay for their crimes, because child abuse is a crime, whether anybody really wants to admit it or not. It's right? So what they have to say here is, an abusive father's involvement with his children is usually based on his own needs, focusing on activities that he likes instead of what the children may want to do. However, his interest in his children may come and go depending on his emotional state. And that's quite interesting, I find. And the reason I know about this stuff is because I grew up abused by both of my parents. And I saw my dad's behavior. And so when I'm reading through this stuff, and looking at this research information, it's pretty, some of it makes clear sense to me, and some of it I don't relate to at all, but some of it I totally do because, like my dad wanted nothing to do with his sons, absolutely nothing to do with his sons, but yet he wanted them to respect him. So, he would beat them up and call them names, and he would just come in the living room, for instance, and just slap my brother and punch him out, kick him a couple of times, and then say, you're going to respect me, boy. Like, that's how my dad was, right? So, and expecting that my brother would then respect him, for why? For what reason, right? And then would have nothing to do with them. Didn't care whether they were in trouble with the law, didn't care if they were on the streets, didn't care, their whole lives. My dad really did not care about his children. He had no ability to, and he still doesn't. He's still living, and he's schizophrenic, right? So he has no ability or capability of understanding what that relationship is with his children, with his offspring. You know what I mean? He doesn't have a relationship with anybody, because it's all about him. And so, he's very sick. He's mentally ill, right? But it's so harsh what people do to their children, right? Some fathers maltreat their children because they believe in the stereotypical role of fathers as disciplinarians. So they take that role on as being the disciplinarian, and then it just becomes abuse because they're not keeping themselves in check. With this, like, I don't like the word discipline because discipline to me is abuse. I was abused as a child, and what most people thought was discipline in my house was actually abuse. Like, because my mother bashed my head in with a rolling pin and beat me severely with it. And that was, in my house, that was discipline, see. Like, that's, my family members all think that was fine that my mother did that she cracked my head open and I was bleeding and spit in my face, threw me out of the house, called me horrible names at the age of 13 years. And, my siblings all think that was okay because they were abused too, see. So there was discipline in our house, right? Another time my mom almost broke my nose. These are some severe beatings that I kind of recall, and the reason I bring them to mention is because they were so severe. And, just horrific abuse, which my family members thought that was just discipline, see. I don't like the word discipline. It just bothers me. But I know for informational purposes, we're trying to get it across discipline, right? Well, there's proper ways to discipline your children, and beating on them and torturing them and breaking their faces and busting their heads open and sexually using them is not discipline, right? There's ways to, and some parents just don't know how to properly discipline their children, right? So some also feel that they have to show others that they are doing a good job as parents, right? Refusing to acknowledge that they may be having a tough time as parents, they take out their frustrations on their children. And that was pretty much my mom's issue because, my mom was abused as a child, didn't want to look like a bad mother. She didn't appreciate what her mother did to her or her siblings. So she didn't even talk to her mother for many, many, many years. They were unreconcilable for many years. And they never did reconcile until way later in my mom's life. My grandmother was quite old by the time they reconciled. And the thing is that, like, my mom didn't want to be like her mother, but she turned out to be exactly like her mother, right? She pleaded and begged the courts to let us stay in the home because we were going to be removed from the home. And my mom said they went to court and they pleaded to keep us, not my dad, but my mom pleaded to keep us in the home. She was like, don't take my children, they're all I have, and blah, blah, blah. And of course, then when we were at home with them, it was like, you're a whore, you're a slut, and slapping you, grabbing the belt, beating you. Like, this is what would happen to us, like my mom. It wasn't like she would take us at home and say, I'm so glad I got to keep my children, and gather us around and love us and be good to us or anything like that. Like, she would tell the courts, oh, don't take my children, I love my children, and then when we got home, beat the crap out of us, call us names, throw things at us, throw us out of the house. Not my siblings, but me. I was really the only one who was ever thrown out of the house, and I was the youngest, like the baby. And, it's absolutely ridiculous what parents will do because they don't want to look like the bad parent, but yet they don't want to get any help, and so they end up hurting their children. And so, fathers will do that too, just as well as mothers, right? Refusing to acknowledge that they may be having a tough time as parents, they take out their frustrations on the children. And, even if they don't want to look like the good parent or bad parent, doesn't matter, they still take their frustrations out on their children quite often. And that's abusers. We're not talking normal parents. I mean, all the information that I present is all about abusive parents. So, I don't want to offend any good parents out there. I'm talking about abusive parents who hurt their children. You know what I mean? Like who abuse horrifically their children. We're talking abuse here. We're not talking just normal parenting stuff, normal family situations. So it's very harsh what abusive parents do to their children and get away with, right? Very sad. So many people, so many children slip through the cracks, and so many abusers are free to walk free from it without ever having to really, to pay for what they've done, which is a crime to abuse a child, right? So it's just important for people to know that. So that's just a very short article on abusive fathers, but I just think it's interesting to take a look at that. People abuse people for many reasons, and it's absolutely horrific that people would choose to abuse because it's a choice. Nobody's standing. No father is forced to abuse their child or to sexually use their child. No one's standing over their father saying, you have to beat your child and you have to burn your child, you have to kill your child, you have to sexually use your child. It's a choice. They make a choice to do what they're doing to their children, right? It's a choice they make, and it's sad that people would make that choice because it's the wrong choice, right? And it's sad that the kids have to pay the price for that. You know what I mean? It's just not right. It never will be right, and I'll continue to speak out against this as long as I live. As long as I'm still on the earth, I'll be speaking out against this, and I plan on writing, like I said before, a few shows ago, that I plan on writing many books. This is just the beginning for me. I wrote 2 books, thanks to Donna Shear and Sandra Potter. Sandra Potter is the CEO and founder of Dreamcatchers for Abused Children, and Donna Shear is the president of Dreamcatchers for Abused Children. Donna Shear is an established author on her own before becoming involved with Dreamcatchers for Abused Children. She was a best-selling author. She still is up there in the ranks. She's one of the top 200 authors in the country in the United States. She's an awesome advocate, and she's the president of Dreamcatchers for Abused Children, and she does this all volunteer. And she saw my blog, which is called Not So Fond Memories Growing Up in an Abusive Home, and she said, it really needs to be a book. You should think about publishing that, and, if you want to do that, contact, let me know, and we'll see about publishing it. And they did. They published my book, Sandra Potter and Donna Shear. It was Donna Shear who saw the blog and actually really, and Sandra Potter, who they said, yeah, it should be a book. So they published it, and because they published it, and it's A Life of Death, the Redemption. That's what I called it, A Life of Death, the Redemption. It's just my blog, really. It was not changed. There was only a few minor changes in it, and there wasn't any real content issues. It was punctuation and tying sentences together, because it was a blog, so it was written in blog format, right? I would come home and write this blog. So we just sort of smoothed it out, but we didn't change. Like, they let my voice be heard. That's my words, and that's truth. And so I donated. I told them, I said, I don't want the money for that book. That book, all the proceeds need to go to Dreamcatchers for Abused Children. So if anybody picks up a copy, just know that the proceeds are going to Dreamcatchers for Abused Children to help stop child abuse, right? And I'm hoping that people will grab a copy of it. It is my life story. It's my family story. And it's harsh what happens to children, but I wanted to be as honest as possible. It is graphic, and it is to the point. I did not sugarcoat it. I just told it like it was. And I hope that people will find some hope in it, right? Because, the redemption is the redemption. And it's the fact that I'm alive and that I'm well, and I survived the abuse. I didn't kill myself like 2 of my siblings did. I didn't become an abuser myself. In so many ways, I've been redeemed, right? And so I wanted a message of hope to go out to people, to, for survivors to hang in there and to not give up ever, right? And I also wrote another book, La Vida Juvies, and that's my one summer, just taking a biopic look at one summer with my friends, just to kind of show the situations that many teens find themselves in, and also that so many teens are abused, right? And that, they might not even consider it abuse, but it is abuse, right? Any action or inaction that hurts or harms a child is abuse. And so, and a child is anyone statutorily, the statutory age for in the state wherever they're at, whether it's 18, 16, 17, whatever, that's the child, right? So, teens are children too, up until the point where their state decides that they're no longer children and are adults. And so many teens, so many children are experiencing abuse, and I wanted that book to be a book for teens, that they could get a hold of, and if they were suffering in that situation, they'd be able to spot it, recognize it, and and to know to get help, whatever it takes to get help. If they're experiencing drug use and substance abuse, and they're just not coping well because they've been abused or they're being abused, to get help, right? So that's why I wrote those books, and both the profits from both of those books are going to dream catchers for abused children, and it was just awesome for them to let my voice be heard, right? I just appreciated that so much, and on behalf of my brothers, mainly A Life of Death or Redemption, I dedicated that book to two of my brothers who really killed themselves. One of my brothers hung himself at the age of 33, and he had tried many times. It wasn't like a first-time attempt. He had tried many times and been saved. And then my other brother died of a drug overdose, just a slow death. He had so many overdoses in his life. I remember him overdosing when I was growing up on a regular basis as a young kid. He was just a teenager, and he continued to do that and lost so many brain cells. But he was such a nice guy, and he was just so abused. He was just so horrifically treated. So was my brother Rob. They're the two that killed themselves. I was also my mother's punching bag. I wanted to kill myself. And so the three of us were really the suicidal ones in the family. And my too, because my parents were suicidal, so they taught us to be suicidal, right? They showed us that they warped our minds to think that suicide was an answer, And so my thing here for people, and that's why I do these shows, otherwise I wouldn't be bothered, is to tell people that suicide is not the answer. And I really wish that I could have reached my brothers before they killed themselves, to try to get some sense of self-worth into them, that they did deserve to stay here, that they did deserve to fight to have a good life, and that's what I'm doing, right? I am fighting every day to maintain and to stay here, and this is my journey, and this is my life. Life's hard for everybody, and it's no joke. A lot of people think that some people just have it made, but actually we all have our little thing that we get over, and everybody will have to deal with something in their lifetime that will cause them to want to give up, or just to think, well, I should just give up or whatever. But you know what? Never ever give up, right? Keep on fighting and keep on going, right? So I want to continue looking at this. But what I was saying about that whole thing was that I do plan on doing this for the rest of my life. So this is what I will be doing. I'm just working right now and doing other things because I have to make a living to support myself. But eventually I plan on doing public speaking and continuing to write. And I'd like to go worldwide. I speak a lot of languages. I could become fluent in quite a few languages rather quickly if I had time to study, because languages are not a problem for me. I don't know what the issue is with my brain, but I just seem to be able to pick up languages quite easily. So if I had a couple of years, I could be fluent in quite a few different languages. So I'm nearly fluent in 2, so I think I could probably manage a few more. And I could go, and I'd like to really do some worldwide public speaking, not just in English, but in their own language, and Spanish and German, and I'd like to learn Persian as well as French, and just really get out there and just start speaking it out, so worldwide. That's what my goal is. So, that this is just the beginning for me, right? And so, that's why I'm doing what I'm doing. Because so many people out there are in this horrific situation right now, and so many children are being abused worldwide, not just North America. And so it's important, I thought, what else do I have to do with the rest of my life, right? This is what gives me a purpose. This is what gives me, and people might say, well, isn't that pathetic? Well, no, you know what? It's awesome, because I was abused as a child. So I was, I'm extremely happy for the people out here who have ever done anything to help a child, right? Like, to me, that's the most beautiful thing in the world, right? Is people who care about other children. They're not even their own children, and they care about them, right? I had a family step in for me when I was 13 and a half who actually showed me more love than anyone had ever showed me in my entire lifetime, because my parents were not able to, and my siblings weren't really able to. So I was that was the first time I ever really experienced any love, any care, any concern, and I was 13 and a half years old. And so, I'm so thankful for people out there who do put themselves out there and, do whatever they can to help children, to make a difference in this world, even if it's not necessarily directly working with children, but just being an advocate, speaking out against abuse. I mean, what it means to me is it's extremely serious because, I'm that little inner child inside of me is the abused child that was being abused, and that little girl will always still be there, right? And so she still cries about this, and she still, part of me still, I remember that abuse, right? I remember what it was like. So that's why I'm doing what I'm doing, because I know what these kids are going through out here. I know the nightmare of a life that they're living. I know a nightmare of a night that they're going to have tonight in their bedrooms, in their homes, wherever they're at, locked down in the basement or whatever, or in the closet or thrown out on the streets or wherever they're at, And I just, I know what many of them will be going through, right? I grew up in hell, in a house full of hell, right? With the most crazy, sadistic, twisted, abusive stuff going on. Physical, verbal, emotional, psychological, sexual abuse, right? You name it, it was present. Neglect as well. So I suffered through all the different types of abuse, and I know what these kids are going through. So it's just breaks my heart that we can't get society, not the people who are listening to my show, because obviously the people that are listening to my show probably care about children or stopping child abuse. But there's a whole section of society that just doesn't seem to realize that it's even happening. And it's like, and we need everyone's voice in this. And we really need to reach these abusers. But how are we going to do that? Because they aren't paying attention. They're too busy abusing their kids. We have abusers out there sexually raping and abusing their children. They're not paying attention to anybody talking about stopping child abuse, right? They're too busy raping, sodomizing, molesting their children, right? And we have parents out there and caregivers and other people who are just physically battering and beating their children. They're not getting the word because they're too busy beating and battering their children. See, we're not reaching the people that we need to reach, you know what I mean? And so the only way we're going to be able to do that is with a lot of hard work, and everyone's got to get involved, you know what I mean? It's going to have to be community after community after community, and everyone stepping up to the plate and saying, we're here, what can we do? Let's sit down and be a think tank. Everybody pull their skills together and their knowledge base. Let's figure out what's going to work. First of all, take a look at what's not working and then get rid of it. Kibosh it, get rid of it. You know what I mean? And anything that is working, let's stay with that and then build on it and, go with it. Because this is so pathetic that so many children, if you look at the headlines out there, we've only got a few minutes left here, so we'll continue on with the abusive siblings on Wednesday night. But, if you take a look at the headlines out there, we have men, fathers, raping and killing their 17-month-old babies and 17-week-old babies, right? We have mothers sexually using their children. We have parents beating their children to death. I used to pray for my mom to beat me to death. I used to pray for the last blow to be it. You know what I mean? Because when you're getting beaten with a rolling pin, you know what I mean, or a table leg, or belts and fists, and being kicked around and punched and thrown into walls, you're kind of, after a while, as an abused child growing up in that year after year after year, you just sort of pray for the. It's like, take me out. If you're going to take me out, do it now. Save me the torture and the suffering year after year of this. You know what I mean? So I was praying that one of those blows would be the last one. And so many of these children out here, it's so incredibly sad. Their parents are killing them. And my parents didn't kill me, and I used to pray for it. Then I was kind of, and then I didn't care about myself, and I did a lot of drugs. I ended up in the gutters. I would pass out, and just wherever. I'd pass out in the gutters, in the streets, at people's homes. I didn't know where I was. I'd wake up with my clothes on, pretty happy that my clothes were still on. I didn't care about myself, you know what I mean? Because my parents didn't care about me. And so, then I grew older and I started to think, no, I'm gonna stick around, I'm gonna fight to live, And then 20 years later I was still thinking about killing myself and still planning my suicides. And so this is why it's so important that we do what we can to stop and prevent child abuse, right? Do whatever you can in your own area. Mainly look out for the kids in your own life, in your own homes, in your own life, and make sure that your own family members and relatives are not being abused, your own little children in your own lives, because 90 to 95% of abuse happens within the home. It's a wake-up call, people. Only 5 to 10% of abuse is stranger danger. The rest is all family members, right? So make sure the children in your own lives are not being abused, right? And if they are, get them some help, right? Have a great night, everybody. We'll talk to you again. I'll be back on tomorrow morning, One Child Abuse Survivor to Another at 6 a.m. And then I'll be back on tomorrow night on Dreamcatchers Talk Radio here on Blog Talk Radio, www.blogtalkradio.com/Dreamcatchers at 11 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So you can check out the show page there. We'll be covering the headlines. Have a great night, everybody. And if you need some information from me, just leave me a message here or get a hold of me on Facebook or whatnot. Take care of yourselves, everybody. Talk to you real soon. Bye-bye.